The Wealth of Stoicism, How Ancient Wisdom Creates Financial Freedom, written by Ronnie Rowland. Published by Growth Literacy Lounge. The richest people in history weren't always the ones who had the most, they were often the ones who needed the least. In an age obsessed with accumulation, this idea sounds almost offensive. We live in a culture that measures success in square footage, likes, and leverage. The hustle never sleeps. The algorithm never rests. We're told that wealth is something you chase, something out there, just beyond your current reality, waiting to be claimed if only you do more, earn more, become more. But what if the opposite is true? What if real wealth begins the moment you stop running? This book is not about retirement plans or real estate strategies, though those have their place. It's about the inner game of money, the deeper psychology of freedom, and the ancient wisdom that understood something we've forgotten: money is a tool, not a trophy. When you reverse that order, life becomes lighter, calmer, clearer. The Stoics knew this centuries ago. They lived in times of empire and upheaval, power and poverty. Yet their writings have endured not because they offered tactics, but because they delivered truth. Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, they weren't anti-wealth. They were pro-wisdom. And wisdom, when applied to money, doesn't just build fortunes, it protects your soul from being sold to one. Consider the words of Naval Ravikant, a modern-day philosopher and entrepreneur: a calm mind, a fit body, and a house full of love. These things cannot be bought. They must be earned. That's what Stoicism teaches us: not to reject wealth, but to redefine it. Not to shrink your life, but to own it, completely, courageously, and without apology. What follows is a journey, not into theory, but into practice. You'll explore how ancient ideas can liberate modern lives. You'll learn how to find peace in the unpredictable, sufficiency in simplicity, and clarity in a world addicted to chaos. This isn't a path for everyone. But if something in you has begun to whisper, there must be another way, then perhaps you're ready. Not to chase more, but to live with less fear, more purpose, and the kind of freedom no market can grant and no crisis can take. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Paradox of Wealth: Why More is Never Enough. A man adrift at sea reaches into the waves, scoops water to his mouth, and drinks. The salt burns his throat. His thirst deepens. He drinks again, and again. With each sip he believes relief is moments away. But the more he consumes, the more parched he becomes. His body weakens, his vision blurs, not from lack of water, but from too much of the wrong kind. This is the modern pursuit of wealth. Every day, millions drink deeply from the ocean of consumerism, hoping it will finally quench their longing. New car, bigger house, newer phone, sleeker watch, louder applause. Yet satisfaction remains always just out of reach, a mirage shimmering on the horizon of achievement. It's not failure that haunts them, but the success that didn't deliver what it promised. Society defines wealth as accumulation. The more you have, the richer you are, but this formula leaves out a crucial variable: desire. Seneca, one of Rome's wealthiest men, warned that the true impoverishment is not in lacking, but in longing. It is not the man who has too little, he wrote, but the man who craves more, that is poor. Modern psychology confirms what the Stoics intuited 2,000 years ago. The phenomenon of hedonic adaptation shows that humans quickly return to a baseline of happiness after acquiring something new. A promotion, a windfall, a luxury, its emotional boost fades rapidly. The brain resets. Contentment evaporates. We begin chasing again, not because we are failing, but because the chase itself is wired into us, unless interrupted. The Stoics offer that interruption. They recognize the flaw not in wealth itself, but in our relationship to it. They did not preach poverty, they preach clarity. The point is not to renounce material success, but to redefine its purpose. Wealth is a tool, not a trophy. When desire governs us, we become enslaved to accumulation, but when we govern desire, we become free. Imagine your version of enough. Not what the world tells you, not what the algorithm flashes before your eyes, but your honest threshold, the place where your needs are met, your responsibilities honored, and your spirit undisturbed. That place is wealth, and it cannot be earned, it must be recognized. Consider this: a person earning modestly, who lives simply, gives generously, and sleeps peacefully, and may be far wealthier than someone with 10 times the income but none of the ease. The difference isn't the size of their paycheck, but the weight of their craving. To begin walking the Stoic path to financial freedom, start with this act of rebellion: define your sufficiency threshold. On paper, outline what a rich life means to you, not in numbers, but in feelings, relationships, rhythms, and values. How much is enough to live, to give, to rest, to grow? Write it down. Let it be your compass. This single act shifts the question from how much more to how much is enough. And in that question lies the quiet liberation that the market can never sell you. When the man at sea finally stops drinking salt water, his body begins to heal, his mind clears. He sees land, or hope, or both. So too with us. The less we crave, the more we possess. The paradox resolves itself not through gain, but through perspective. If wealth were merely a number, we would have solved poverty of spirit long ago. But true wealth is measured in stillness, sufficiency, and sovereignty over desire. Next, we follow Seneca deeper, not into theory, but into practice. What did this wealthy philosopher track in his personal ledger? Not gold or land, but clarity, restraint, and time. Craving, not lack, is the source of poverty. The pursuit of more often erodes peace. Defining enough is the first act of financial freedom. Where in your life have you been drinking seawater, mistaking it for nourishment? Write your sufficiency threshold, the point where more no longer adds meaning, just noise. Let it guide your next decision. Chapter 2. Seneca's Ledger: How to Measure True Riches. Picture a merchant at dusk, oil lamp flickering, parchment open. But instead of tallying coins or counting cargo, he inventories his peace. He measures his contentment, assesses the weight of his desires, and calculates the time he spent in harmony with his values. This is not fiction. This is philosophy lived. This is Seneca's ledger. Seneca lived at the crossroads of extreme wealth and extreme wisdom. A statesman with immense property, political power, and influence, yet in his writings, we meet a man more concerned with the riches of self-command than silver. His life invites a new accounting method, not of assets and liabilities, but of alignment and deviation. He asks us not what we own, but what owns us. In modern terms, the net worth obsession distorts life's true balance sheet. We count digits, not direction. Incomes rise while integrity declines. The market booms as meaning shrinks. But the Stoic understands wealth is not merely the sum of possessions, but the subtraction of unnecessary craving. Seneca distinguished between what was valuable and what merely glittered. His correspondence reveals a man constantly weighing how his choices aligned with his philosophical convictions. To own much and still remain unattached, that was his true wealth, not detachment through lack, but through lucidity. Consider this: two people may own the same house. One sees it as a fortress of ego, proof of ascent. The other, as shelter, a place to cultivate peace. The object is identical. The wealth is not. One is captive to the symbol. The other is free to enjoy the substance. This distinction becomes crucial in our age of performative prosperity. Social media encourages public ledgers, likes, followers, impressions. But the Stoic ledger is private. It records how many mornings began with stillness, how many days ended without regret, how often one's choices aligned with deeper principles. There is emerging science behind this ancient wisdom. Studies in behavioral economics show that after a certain threshold, once needs and modest comforts are met, more money contributes little to well-being. What matters more is autonomy, purpose, and social connection. In other words, the Stoic was not only moral, he was mathematically efficient. To adopt Seneca's ledger, begin not with your bank account but with your calendar. Where does your time go? Who has your attention? Which moments leave you full, and which leave you hollow? These questions illuminate your actual wealth far better than any spreadsheet. Then turn inward. Tally your days of emotional clarity. Count how often you resist impulse. Measure generosity, not in size, but in spontaneity. These are the true indicators of a life well lived. Seneca's wealth was not in hoarding but in harnessing. He used his riches to test his detachment, not to secure admiration. This is a radical act in a society trained to announce success, to perform achievement. But the quiet confidence of the Stoic does not clamor. It simply asks, are you governed by your values or by your valuations? Imagine updating your personal ledger not with earnings, but with essentials. Did I live simply today? Did I act justly? Did I respond to challenges with composure? Did I need less, give more, crave nothing? Each affirmative answer adds real wealth to your account. This is the recalibration. To measure success not by surplus but by serenity. Not by applause but by alignment. And in that recalibration, we become solvent in the ways that count. The ledger is yours to write. It is written daily, in silence, and its balance is reflected not in status but in stillness. Ahead lies a more invisible cost, desire itself. In the next chapter, we'll unearth how craving operates like debt, quiet, corrosive, and compounding. Seneca measured wealth by values, not valuables. Modern prosperity often masks internal bankruptcy. A Stoic ledger tracks peace, purpose, and presence. If your wealth were measured in time, peace, and self-control, how rich would you be? Tonight, begin your personal ledger. Record one action aligned with your core values and one that wasn't. Watch the pattern emerge. Chapter 3. Desire as Debt, the Hidden Cost of Craving. A man walks freely through a lavish marketplace, hands empty, heart full. Another man, burdened with bags and boxes, wears a tight expression. The first owes nothing. The second, though outwardly rich, is drowning in invisible debts, obligations not to creditors, but to cravings. This is the debt no accountant sees. This is the weight of unchecked desire. Craving is not just a feeling, it is a liability, an interest-bearing condition that compounds silently over time. Every time we say, I'll be happy when, we write an emotional IOU, and the more we chase, the more those debts accumulate. The cost is not paid in money, but in presence, peace, and patience. We become mentally bankrupt in the pursuit of something we convinced ourselves would finally balance the books. Epictetus, who owned nothing but himself, taught that freedom is not about possessing things, but about not being possessed by them. He warned that desire, when left unexamined, enslaves. It moves the mind from sufficiency to scarcity, from gratitude to grasping. The man who needs less owns more, even if he has less. The one who needs everything owns nothing, not even his own contentment. Modern neuroscience agrees. Craving activates the brain's dopamine circuits, the same ones triggered by addictive substances. But unlike pleasure, which is momentary and complete, desire is anticipatory and incomplete. The brain releases dopamine in the pursuit, not the possession. This is the tragic bait and switch. The more we crave, the less satisfaction we get upon arrival, and so we crave again, harder, deeper. Desire whispers that happiness is always just beyond the next acquisition, but that horizon never gets closer. Instead, it moves with us, just out of reach, like a mirage in the desert. We believe the next raise, next house, next recognition will settle the restlessness. It doesn't. Because the problem was never what we lacked, but that we were addicted to lacking. The Stoics offered a different arithmetic. Instead of increasing possessions, they taught us to decrease dependencies. Instead of striving for what is beyond reach, they urged us to reclaim what is already within. The goal was not to silence desire altogether, but to tame it, to channel it toward what is durable, virtuous, and within our control. To begin, conduct an audit not of your finances, but of your longings. What do you think you need to be at peace? List them. Then, beside each item, ask, is this truly essential, or is it a proxy for something deeper, validation, control, identity? Often, the things we pursue are shadows of real needs we haven't named. Strip the shadow. Identify the source. This exercise turns the tide. When we know what drives us, we can interrupt the loop. We can choose sufficiency over scarcity, clarity over compulsion. We stop chasing and start choosing. This is the debt cancellation the Stoics practiced, not financial absolution, but psychic liberation. Desire is not evil. It is energy. But energy without direction becomes destruction. The Stoic masters were not desireless, they desired wisdom, courage, justice, tranquility. They simply refused to desire what they could not control, and in doing so, they found a kind of wealth that neither rusts nor rots. And to be rich is to owe nothing to longing. To walk the marketplace, content with empty hands and a full spirit. To live free of emotional interest payments. This is not renunciation, it is reclamation. In the next chapter, we'll meet a man who ruled the known world but began each day preparing to lose it. Marcus Aurelius did not extinguish desire, he refined it. Craving compounds like debt, quiet and corrosive. Dopamine fuels pursuit, not peace. Taming desire is the gateway to true freedom. What do you think you need that may actually be costing you peace? List your top 5 wants. Cross out one today. Observe how it loosens your grip, and its grip on you. Chapter 4. The Emperor's Morning, Ruling Your Mind Like Marcus. Each morning, before the empire stirred, Marcus Aurelius would retreat to a quiet corner of the palace. Surrounded by scrolls and silence, he wrote. Not as a ruler issuing decrees, but as a man trying to master himself. His meditations were not for the Senate, not for his soldiers, not even for his successors. They were reminders for the one battle he fought daily, the one within. It's easy to imagine an emperor rising to command armies, negotiate treaties, and make judgments that shaped history. But Marcus began each day with something far more powerful: perspective. He rehearsed loss, practiced humility, and anticipated insult. Not to grow bitter, but to grow resilient. He understood that before he could govern others, he had to govern his thoughts. Modern life offers no throne, but it offers the same challenge. Emails arrive before sunrise. Notifications tap the shoulder before the first breath. The mind is pulled into urgency before intention can take root. Yet the same principle applies: if you do not lead your thoughts, they will lead you, and rarely toward peace. Marcus practiced what the Stoics called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of adversity. He visualized the day's potential frictions, rude people, delays, loss, discomfort, not to dread them, but to inoculate himself. By imagining hardship, he made it manageable. He removed the sting of surprise. When difficulty came, he recognized it. He had already shaken its hand. This is not pessimism. It is preparation. It is the discipline of expectation, not for perfection, but for unpredictability. By welcoming reality before it arrives, we soften its blow and sharpen our response. We are no longer caught off guard. We are already grounded. There is wisdom in beginning the day before the day begins, not with ambition, but with awareness. Before reaching for your phone, reach for your center. Before letting the world tell you what matters, decide for yourself. This is the quiet rebellion the Stoics modeled, choosing your mental state before the world chooses it for you. Neuroscience supports what Marcus practiced. Morning routines steeped in reflection and intention activate the brain's prefrontal cortex, the seat of judgment, focus, and restraint. In contrast, reactive habits stimulate the amygdala, the center of fear and impulse. The Stoics didn't know the terminology, but they lived the truth. Begin the day calmly, and the mind follows suit. You don't need a palace. You need a pause. 10 minutes of clarity can reshape 10 hours of chaos. Begin with 3 questions. What is likely to test me today? What virtue will I need to respond well? What outcome can I let go of? These questions do not shield you from hardship. They simply ensure you are not surprised by it. And when the insults come, or the plans unravel, you will not say, "Why me?" but "Ah, yes, you again." And you will respond, not react. Marcus knew he could not control the empire's weather, only his sails. He could not prevent the storm, but he could prepare his mind to steer through it. And in that preparation, he found peace, not after the battle, but before it. Desire to rule others may be power, but to rule oneself is sovereignty. And every morning grants that crown, if we are willing to wear it. Next, we descend from the emperor's halls to the humble practice of frugality, not as austerity, but as liberation. For what we do not need cannot own us. Morning reflection shapes emotional sovereignty. Expectation of difficulty disarms its power. Preparation is the quiet source of peace. What would change if you began each day leading your thoughts, instead of following them? Tomorrow morning, spend 5 minutes in silence. Ask Marcus's 3 questions. Let clarity take the throne before the chaos begins. Chapter 5. Frugality as freedom, living below, rising above. A man in a plain cloak walks past a marble villa. He does not look enviously. He nods in appreciation and continues on. His pace is steady, his mind unburdened. He carries little, yet lacks nothing. This is not the walk of poverty, it is the stride of freedom. The cloak may be simple, but the soul beneath it is sovereign. Frugality, in our modern lexicon, often connotes deprivation. It evokes images of coupon cutting and self-denial, of scarcity and austerity. But the Stoics saw it differently. To them, frugality was not about having less, but about needing less. It was not about sacrifice, it was about selectivity. Seneca, wealthy in coin yet voluntarily sparse in comfort, practiced frugality not to display virtue, but to develop it. Living below one's means is not merely a financial decision, it is a philosophical one. It is the decision to say, I have enough, when the world screams you need more. It is the act of choosing sufficiency over spectacle. It is the rejection of luxury's lure, not because luxury is evil, but because dependence on it is. The Stoics warned of comfort's cunning trap. What begins as convenience quickly calcifies into necessity. The silk sheets, the imported wine, the elite experience, soon they become expected, and expectation breeds entitlement, which in turn births anxiety. The loss of comfort then feels like injustice, not transition. But he who trains himself to enjoy simplicity is immune to such shifts. Seneca would sleep on the floor for nights at a time. He would eat coarse bread, wear unadorned clothing, and remind himself that these conditions were not suffering, but reality for most. In doing so, he developed resilience. He fortified the soul against misfortune. When stripped of comfort, he would not panic, for he had practiced being without. This practice is more relevant now than ever. In a culture saturated with upgrades, living simply is subversive. The average consumer is ensnared by debt, not just financial, but psychological. They owe their peace to the next purchase, their identity to brand association, and their joy to the approval of others. To live frugally is to reclaim agency, and to say, I can enjoy more, but I don't require it, is to cut the leash of dependency. Research shows that beyond basic needs and modest comforts, increased spending has little correlation with happiness. But experiences rooted in purpose, relationships anchored in presence, and lives aligned with values, these create lasting satisfaction. Frugality frees us to pursue these deeper investments. Begin not by cutting back, but by clarifying. Ask what truly adds value to your life. What do you use, love, and need? What purchases were driven by impulse, insecurity, or image? Make a list. Not to shame, but to see. Awareness is the beginning of liberation. Then, try voluntary simplicity for 1 week. Prepare basic meals. Delay unnecessary purchases. Wear what you already own. Observe how discomfort fades, how clarity grows. Notice that less does not mean loss, it often means lightness. The goal is not asceticism, it is agility. When we can live well with little, we are no longer trapped by much. We are free to choose, to adapt, to endure. The man in the modest cloak has trained his spirit. He fears no recession, no inflation, no downturn, because his wealth is not threatened by scarcity. It is built on sufficiency. Next, we turn toward the uncontrollable, the markets, the noise, the external storms. But as the Stoics teach, even amidst chaos, control is still possible. Not of events, but of self. Frugality is not scarcity, it is selectivity. Voluntary simplicity builds resilience. Needing less makes you more free. Where in your life are you mistaking excess for security? Practice 1 day of voluntary simplicity this week. Eat simply, buy nothing, and reflect on what truly sustains you. Chapter 6. Mastery over markets, what you can actually control. A sailor cannot command the wind, but he can set his sail. He cannot still the storm, but he can study its patterns, brace his vessel, and steer with purpose. In the chaos of water and sky, he learns the ancient discipline of control, selective, sober, and internal. This was the Stoics' philosophy applied to markets before markets even bore that name. The modern economy moves like the weather, sudden, volatile, indifferent to our preferences. 1 day up, the next down. News cycles flare, trends reverse, bubbles burst. The anxious investor watches screens flash red and green, heart tethered to digits. But the Stoic sees something different. He sees noise. He sees illusion. and he remembers, the only market worth mastering is the one inside. Epictetus, born into slavery and later revered as a teacher of inner strength, taught the foundational principle of Stoic control: some things are up to us, and some things are not. This is not a motivational slogan, it is a sorting mechanism for the soul. The stock price, the interest rate, and the global recession, these lie beyond our grasp. But our habits, our choices, our emotional responses, they belong to us fully and without condition. Modern behavioral economics confirms that most financial mistakes are not about knowledge, but about behavior. The investor who panics during a dip, the spender who reacts to boredom with buying, the earner who inflates lifestyle with each raise, these are not rational decisions. They are emotional reactions. And emotion is where Stoicism goes to work. The market does not punish ignorance so much as it punishes impatience. The Stoic practices patience like currency. He is not seduced by short-term gains or paralyzed by short-term losses. He sees in every fluctuation a test of character, not just capital. The goal is not to beat the market, but to beat the tendency to react blindly to it. Mastery over markets begins with clarity about control. Begin with a blank page. On one side, list what you cannot control: inflation, political changes, economic downturns, other people's spending, future interest rates. On the other side, list what you can: your savings rate, your investment habits, your spending choices, your financial philosophy. This simple act reveals where your energy should flow, and where it should not. The Stoics didn't advocate indifference. They advocated discernment. It's not that market outcomes don't matter, it's that they don't merit your peace. You do your part. You show up, prepare, act wisely, and accept results with composure. This is not passive. It is powerful. Because it means your emotional state is no longer at the mercy of the external world. Imagine living in such a way that no headline steals your serenity. No dip in the market erodes your dignity. No loss of opportunity clouds your long view. This is not financial naivete. It is emotional discipline. The kind that outperforms panic, that endures downturns, that stays solvent through storms. It's worth remembering, Marcus Aurelius governed through plague, war, and political instability. Yet in his writings he rarely mentions these events directly. Instead, he turns inward. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. The markets are the stage. But the play, the real play, is within. To master the market is to master the impulse to be mastered by it. To study charts is helpful. To study one's reactions to charts is essential. Because the financial winds will always shift, but your sail, if trained, trimmed, and tended, can still reach its destination. Next, we explore a man who had nothing, yet possessed more than kings. Epictetus, enslaved in body, free in mind, teaches us the most misunderstood form of wealth: ownership of self. Control is limited, but powerful when focused inward. Behavioral discipline outperforms emotional reaction. The market is external, mastery is internal. Where are you wasting energy trying to control what you cannot? Draw 2 columns, can control and can't control. Revisit it weekly. Let your efforts align with the first, and release the second. Chapter 7. The Slave Who Taught Kings, Redefining Ownership. A man owned by another walks the dusty streets of Rome, his tunic threadbare, his possessions few. Yet within him burns a clarity that cannot be seized. Chains may hold his body, but not his mind. This man is Epictetus. He owned nothing, no land, no title, no coin, and yet emperors would later study his words, seeking a freedom he already possessed. Ownership, in its conventional sense, is tied to things: land, houses, stocks, tools, clothes, things we acquire, display, protect. But the Stoics invert the idea. To them, true ownership is measured not by what is under your name but what is under your command. You may have a palace and still be a servant to your appetites. You may have nothing and still be master of your mind. Epictetus knew this paradox intimately. Born into slavery, he was trained to understand his limits. But instead of resisting them with resentment, he reframed them with reason. He taught that while others might own his labor, they could not touch his attitude. His master could bind his limbs, but not his logic. From this clarity emerged one of the most radical insights of Stoic philosophy. You are free when you no longer need what can be taken from you. This insight collides with modern values. Today's culture ties identity to possessions. We define success by accumulation. What we drive, where we live, how we dress, these become proxies for who we are. But beneath the surface, ownership often becomes enslavement. The larger the house, the heavier the mortgage, the flashier the car, the deeper the debt. The more we have, the more we fear losing. The Stoics diagnosed this fear as the real captivity. They taught that freedom does not begin with acquisition, but with detachment. Not the detachment of indifference, but the detachment of sovereignty. To use without being used by, to own without being owned. This distinction is not theoretical. It's practical. Imagine losing everything material tomorrow, your job, your savings, your possessions. Could you still preserve your peace? Could you adapt without bitterness? Could you remain intact within? If the answer is no, then you are not yet the owner. You are the owned. Reclaiming ownership begins with awareness. Conduct an audit, not of your finances but of your dependencies. What possessions make you anxious to protect? What conveniences provoke outrage when interrupted? What labels define your worth? Each one reveals a hidden chain, however gilded. Then ask, what can I live without and still remain myself? This question is not meant to strip you of joy, but to clarify where your self is anchored. The less you depend on, the more agile you become. This is not about asceticism, it is about autonomy. Epictetus taught not only from the margins, but from the center of truth. His lectures drew Roman elites. His teachings endured centuries. Why? Because he offered something timeless, the architecture of inner freedom. He showed that no one owns you unless you hand them the keys to your peace, not your employer, not your partner, not the market, not society. The irony is that true power often appears powerless. The Stoic doesn't seek dominance. He seeks dignity. He doesn't demand control. He exercises composure. And in doing so, he reclaims the only thing that matters, the self, undistorted by possession. Next, we enter the storm, the swirling uncertainty of life's volatility. But as we'll see, stillness is not the absence of noise. It is the calm eye at the center, anchored not in the world, but in wisdom. True ownership is mastery over what cannot be taken. Possessions often possess the possessor. Detachment breeds the highest form of autonomy. What owns you more than you own it, and why? Choose one possession you cling to emotionally, but one day without it. Observe what arises and what falls away. Chapter 8. Stillness in a Storm, Emotional Wealth in Volatile Times. The sea roars, the mast groans, the crew scrambles, but deep in the ship's hold, a lantern sways gently, undisturbed by the chaos above. It burns quietly, unflickering, casting its steady glow in a pocket of calm. This is stillness, not the absence of turbulence, but a sanctuary within it. And in the Stoic tradition, stillness is not a luxury, it is a form of wealth. Emotional wealth is rarely measured, yet it governs everything. In markets, in relationships, in crisis, it is the inner state that shapes the outer response. A rich man may crumble under pressure, while a modest one stands composed. The difference is not income. It is internal economy, how one spends attention, guards peace, and responds to uncertainty. The Stoics lived in uncertain times. War, disease, exile, betrayal, these were not hypotheticals but daily realities. Yet their writings are marked not by panic, but by poise. Marcus Aurelius, in the midst of plague and insurrection, wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." His empire trembled, but his sentences held steady. Today, volatility takes new forms: economic swings, information overload, cultural instability. Fear is broadcast hourly. Outrage is monetized. The mind becomes a battlefield. And yet, within this storm, the Stoic whispers, "You can remain still." Stillness is not passivity. It is presence without panic. It is the practiced ability to pause, to breathe, to observe without immediate reaction. It is not the erasure of feeling, but the elevation of awareness. You feel the wave but do not drown in it. You acknowledge the wind but are not blown away. Modern neuroscience echoes this ancient wisdom. Studies on mindfulness show that regular reflection and conscious breathing reduce cortisol, regulate the nervous system, and increase resilience. The Stoics didn't meditate cross-legged with apps, they meditated with their mornings, their pen, their posture. They journaled fears, interrogated assumptions, reframed perceptions. Their tools were simple, their effects profound. To cultivate stillness is to develop emotional wealth, a wealth that does not crash with markets or erode under pressure. It's the ability to sit in discomfort and not be undone by it, to hear news without spiraling, and to endure loss without collapsing. Not because you're hardened, but because you're anchored. Begin the practice now. When the next surge of emotion hits, anger, fear, envy, pause. Don't act. Don't argue. Observe it like a storm cloud. Watch it pass. Ask what part of this is within my control. This moment, this breath, this decision, that is yours. Everything else is weather. Stillness also requires subtraction. Noise fuels unrest. Consider how much peace is lost to constant alerts, breaking headlines, and algorithmic bait. The Stoics valued input that deepened thought, not scattered it. They chose what to consume as carefully as what to own. Guard your inputs. Protect your mental diet. Turn the volume down and the signal up. In times of turmoil, the emotionally wealthy do not disappear. They become beacons. Their calm invites clarity in others. Their presence diffuses panic. They do not dominate the room, they steady it. And often, they do so silently. Imagine a life where your mood is not dictated by headlines, where your value does not swing with the Tao, where you respond with principle, not impulse. This is emotional wealth, available to anyone, dependent on no external condition, earned by no transaction but presence. Next, we explore sufficiency, not as settling, but as a strategy. Because the one who sees enough as abundance lives like a king, even in a cottage. Stillness is an inner discipline, not a passive state. Emotional wealth protects you from external volatility. Peace is earned by practice, not circumstances. When was the last time you paused before reacting, and what did it change? For one moment today, pause during stress. Breathe deeply. Notice the space between stimulus and response. That space is your power. Chapter 9. Sufficiency is luxury, practicing the art of enough. In a quiet village, a traveler arrives with a heavy pack. He boasts of distant lands and countless treasures. A local watches him, sipping tea, content in silence. The traveler asks what else the man owns. Only what I need, the villager replies, which is more than enough. The traveler laughs, but later, alone, he cannot shake the sense that the man with less somehow holds more. Sufficiency is not mediocrity, it is mastery. To know what is enough and to live within it is the mark of a person rich not in things, but in understanding. In a culture engineered to amplify desire, sufficiency feels radical. But it is not rebellion, it is return. A return to clarity, to gratitude, to peace. Modern consumerism is built on one word: more. More convenience, more prestige, more features, more returns. But each increment of more often delivers diminishing joy and multiplying complexity. The car is faster, but the debt is heavier. The house is larger, but the stillness is gone. The phone is smarter, but the mind is louder. This is the cost of endless upgrade. Sufficiency becomes invisible. The Stoics brought sufficiency back into view. They taught that luxury is not found in possession, but in perception. Seneca wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." To crave less is to be full. To define enough is to draw a boundary around chaos. That boundary is not a prison, it is a fortress. Gratitude is the cornerstone of sufficiency. Without it, even abundance feels barren. Yet with it, even modesty feels magnificent. Studies in positive psychology show that regular gratitude practice increases life satisfaction, reduces material envy, and improves resilience. This is not spiritual fluff, it is practical alignment. The grateful person sees clearly. They are not fooled by glimmer, they are anchored in truth. To practice sufficiency is to ask, what truly sustains me? What do I reach for out of habit, not need? What am I chasing that adds no depth to my days? These are uncomfortable questions. They strip away layers of social proof and market noise. But they reveal something priceless, the contours of a life you actually want. Begin this inquiry with your surroundings. Look at your home, your closet, your schedule. Are these things in service to your peace, or has peace been sacrificed to maintain them? The Stoics didn't reject material comfort, they rejected dependence on it. Comfort is fine. Addiction to comfort is bondage. Sufficiency also reframes ambition. It does not mean you stop growing, learning, or earning. It means you know why. You pursue goals not to impress others or silence insecurity, but to expand your ability to contribute, to create, to serve. The Stoic live simply not because they lack ambition, but because their ambition is rightly directed. Imagine a day where you want nothing more than what you already have. Not because you gave up, but because you woke up, you saw clearly. You stopped chasing and started stewarding. This is the real luxury, not silk or speed or spectacle, but the deep sigh of contentment. The person who has enough is invulnerable to manipulation. Ads lose their power. Comparisons lose their sting. The void advertisers try to fill doesn't exist. And so the Stoic becomes unshakable, not because they have everything, but because they need so little. Next, we turn to gratitude, not as a vague sentiment, but as a daily practice that multiplies wealth without spending a cent. Sufficiency is not scarcity, it is clarity. Gratitude reveals what is already enough. Defining enough protects your peace and purpose. What would your life look like if enough became your measure of success? List 3 things you once wanted badly but now take for granted. Reflect on how they once seemed distant, and how they now quietly define your abundance. Chapter 10. Gratitude as Currency, the Practice That Pays. A beggar sits on a stone, hands empty, eyes soft. A merchant passes, weighed down by gold, muttering complaints about trade and taxes. The beggar nods to the sun, the breeze, the warmth in his chest. I have much, he whispers. The merchant, though rich in things, feels poor. The beggar, though lacking possessions, feels full. The difference is not in their accounts, but in their awareness. Gratitude is not a feeling reserved for feast days and fleeting moments. It is a discipline, a lens, a form of wealth. The Stoics treated it not as a reaction, but as a ritual. Seneca called it the most sacred debt. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily to appreciate the breath he drew, the people he loved, the chance to act with virtue one more time. Gratitude reveals the value of what we already possess. Without it, abundance is invisible. With it, even the smallest comfort becomes a treasure, a warm drink, a quiet morning, a conversation without hurry. These are not luxuries in the marketplace, but they are luxuries of the spirit. Modern research affirms what ancient wisdom knew. Studies in psychology and neuroscience have found that consistent gratitude practices improve mood, sleep, resilience, and overall well-being. The brain, trained to scan for threats and problems, begins to rewire itself to notice beauty and sufficiency instead. Gratitude does not erase difficulty. It reveals context. It frames hardship inside a larger truth: not all is broken. Financial anxiety often stems not from actual lack, but from perceived lack. The belief that one should have more, be more, show more. Gratitude interrupts this illusion. It reminds us that wealth is not only what we earn, but what we enjoy, and enjoyment begins with noticing. Gratitude also acts as a stabilizer in volatility. When markets drop, when plans fail, when expectations collapse, gratitude keeps the floor from falling out beneath us. It says, yes, this hurts. But no, this is not all there is. The emotionally wealthy do not deny loss. They simply refuse to let it eclipse the full picture. Begin the practice with precision. Vague gratitude fades quickly. Be specific. Don't just write, I'm grateful for my home. Write, I'm grateful for the quiet corner by the window where I can think. Don't say, I'm thankful for friends. Say, I'm thankful for the laugh I shared yesterday with someone who understands me. I do this daily, ideally in the morning, before the noise, before the demands. 3 things. Write them, say them, reflect on them. Let them season your thinking like salt enhances flavor. This is not sentiment, it is strategy. A grateful mind sees more, fears less, and compares rarely. There is also gratitude's twin virtue, appreciation. Gratitude is noticing what you have. Appreciation is using it fully, enjoying it deeply, and honoring it daily. The Stoics did not stockpile joy, they spent it. They squeezed the fruit of life not because they feared scarcity, but because they respected time. A grateful person does not deny ambition, but they are not enslaved by it. They pursue growth from a place of wholeness, not desperation. They earn without greed, give without resentment, and live without envy. This is the quiet profit of practiced gratitude. Next, we look at what the Stoics would invest in today, not just financially, but existentially. Because once you are no longer owned by things, you are free to choose what truly multiplies: wisdom, relationships, purpose, and peace. Gratitude turns perception into prosperity. Specific daily practice rewires the mind towards sufficiency. Appreciation deepens the value of what you already have. What simple gift have you overlooked today that once would have thrilled you? Write down 3 precise things you're grateful for, today, right now. Read them aloud. Let that awareness shape your next decision. Chapter 11. The Stoic Portfolio: Investing in What Matters. A farmer tends to his land not with urgency, but with care. He plants deliberately, waters patiently, and trusts the rhythm of seasons. He does not shout at the rain or beg the sun to rise. He invests in what he can influence: soil, seed, and attention. And over time, something priceless grows. Not just crops, but peace. The Stoic too was a kind of farmer, one who cultivated the soul. He did not ignore material life, but he knew the deeper yield came from a different portfolio. While others obsessed over assets and interest rates, the Stoic invested in character, discipline, time, and wisdom. These are not metaphorical assets. They are enduring ones, immune to inflation, immune to theft, and endlessly compounding. In our world, the idea of a portfolio is almost always financial. We measure wealth in returns, track it in dashboards, and obsess over its rise and fall. But a truly balanced portfolio must account for more than markets. What about your relationships? Your energy? Your mental clarity? Your spiritual foundation? The Stoics remind us, not everything valuable is visible, and not everything measured matters. Time is the first and most fragile asset. Seneca warned that people guard their money more jealously than their hours. Yet time is the one thing we spend daily without the promise of earning more. The Stoic invests it wisely, in contemplation, in connection, in creation. Wasted time is not just lost opportunity, it is lost life. Our attention is the next investment. What we focus on grows. Marcus Aurelius wrote not to explain events, but to master his response to them. His daily writings were deposits into the account of his mind, sharpening clarity, strengthening resilience. Today, attention is under siege. Devices, notifications, and media compete for it. The Stoic filters aggressively. He is frugal with his focus. Then comes energy, physical, emotional, and mental. Energy, like capital, must be stewarded. The Stoic knows the cost of resentment, worry, distraction. He spends energy on what nourishes habits, health, and honest labor. He does not burn himself out trying to win what he does not need. Finally, there is virtue. For the Stoic, virtue is not moral decoration, it is foundational equity. Courage, justice, temperance, wisdom, these are the blue-chip stocks of the soul. They don't fluctuate with headlines. They don't crash when trends shift. They grow quietly, reliably, through practice and reflection. The modern investor diversifies to reduce risk. The Stoic diversifies to reduce regret. He invests not just in markets, but in meaning. He doesn't wait for a future windfall to feel secure. He builds security from the inside out. His joy does not depend on external surpluses, but on internal sufficiency. Build your own Stoic portfolio. List your core assets, not financial, but existential: time, attention, energy, virtue, relationships. Are you investing in them daily? Or are they being depleted by busyness, distraction, or neglect? Rebalance accordingly. Withdraw from what drains, contribute to what compounds. This approach does not ignore money, it places it in context. Money is a tool, a resource, a means, not a master. Use it to support your values, not to substitute for them. Wealth is not what sits in your account, it's what flows through your days with purpose. The Stoic portfolio is not managed in spreadsheets, it is tended in choices, in rituals, in pauses. And like a well-farmed field, it yields something rare, a life that grows richer with time, regardless of circumstance. A rich life invests in time, attention, energy, and virtue. Not all value is visible, not all returns are financial. A well-balanced soul outperforms any volatile market. Where are you over-investing for gain and under-investing in meaning? Choose one internal asset, your time, attention, energy, or virtue, and make one small deposit today. Guard it. Grow it, let it yield, take care and be well.